this soon-to-be wet morning. Welcome to Shepherd's House. We wanted to know that we're so happy to see you, you're loved, and we are one big happy family. Amen. If you would open your Bibles to Genesis 32, verse 22. If you have, you can give me an amen. I got it. I'm there. Genesis 32, verse 22. If anybody needs a Bible, we have some over there. Feel free to grab one. You know somebody that needs it. Or you can open your Holy app. Your tablet. Genesis 32, verse 22. For that? All right. Does anybody have a title for this portion of Scripture?
Wrestling with God.
Wrestling with God. Anything else? Jacob wrestles with God. I have that too. Jacob wrestles with God. And it reads like this. Genesis 32, verse 22. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Verse 26. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him, and he passed Peniel, limping because of his sin. Today I want to talk about rest. If you're a note taker, this message I've entitled it Wrestling to Rest. And I want to ask, when was the last time you rested? When was the last time you really rested? Maybe you're thinking of a time you had to get out of work and you took a day off. No reason, you weren't sick, you didn't need to do anything, you just needed a break from it all. Anybody? But what happens? Usually work still goes on. So you come back and now you have yesterday's work and today's work to do. Or maybe you're thinking of a long weekend like this weekend. It's a long weekend. But then we get closer to that work day that's coming up and we look back and we're like, what happened to the weekend? Wasn't it just like Friday yesterday? And we dread going back to work. And usually what happens? Somebody asks you, "How was your weekend?" Like, "Oh, it was too short, man. It was too short. It was just, I need a longer weekend." Right? Or maybe you're a parent and you know that you don't get a lot of moments of rest. You have a kid, a young child, and you put them to sleep, but you can't rest because you have to go do housework or anything else, pay the bills. And once you're done, you sit down and you finally close your eyes for a second. And the baby gets up, crying, and you have to go tend to them. Maybe that one hit a little bit too close to home or something. But what's the pinnacle? What's the ideal vision of a vacation? What's the ideal for a vacation? For a day of rest? It's probably a vacation, right? maybe in a beach area, boom, maybe. You're on the beach, in the sand, with a drink in your hand. I'm not gonna tell you what the drink has, so that's up to you. And you have your sunglasses on, and not a care in the world, right? Some of you are like just transported yourself right there, right? But when we come back, somebody says, "How was your vacation?" And raise your hand if you've ever said, "It was good, but I feel like I need a vacation from my vacation." I know I've said that. And if we're honest, it never seems balanced, right? Our rest is never really balanced with our busy life, with our work life, with our everyday need to do this list life. And if we're being further honest, not a lot of people can afford, for whatever reason, to take those moments of rest. Isn't it just the worst when you come up to somebody that juggles their busy life so perfectly that they have 2 jobs, 9 kids, they're going to work, they volunteer at a shelter, they're starting up a business, and they only get 4 hours of sleep, and every morning they get up with a smile on their face and they're like, "Good morning, blessings, how are you? Everything's great in my life." And I'm like, I need a nap just to get out of the house at 9 p.m. I usually take a nap almost every single day. But anyway, do you want to hear some side effects of not resting enough? Like, yes, I don't want to hear that. Alright, we have a few. Memory issues. Mood changes. Somebody say amen to that one. Weakened immunity. Risk of diabetes. Risk of heart disease. High blood pressure. And even weight gain. Some of us are like, after church, I'm going to go home and take a nap right away. That's why I look this good, because I take naps. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but if I overexert myself, if I work a little bit too hard, eventually it'll catch up to me. Eventually there'll be a day when I wake up and I'm just sick. Like sick. Somehow, I didn't get contagious from anybody. I'm just sick. My body aches, I have a headache, runny nose, and I call out sick. And I sleep for the most of the day, and by the evening, I'm just better. It wasn't like a flu, it wasn't anything, my body knew that I was overexerting myself and it needed that rest. That's happened to me, community, so I don't feel so alone. But rest is very important, and in this Western culture, in this age of technology especially with social media, the busy life is praised. And the restful life often seems like a waste of time. Like if you have time to watch Netflix and you have time to go back to school or get another job. Not that anything's wrong with those things, but it's often seen as a negative to rest. I know when I go back to work and people ask me, like, what did you do this weekend? I'm like, nothing, absolutely nothing. Like, oh, I wish I could do that. But they never do it. Why? Because rest is seen like a negative. It's a waste of time. But eventually it'll catch up to you. In this age of technology, we have Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and Twitch, I don't know what else technologies, Facebook, I never use this, so I always forget something. But it encourages that lifestyle. It encourages jealousy and envy towards those people that have that busy life. Like, oh babe, they're going on vacation again? Like, why aren't we that happy? oh, I wish I had that. That's nice. That would be nice to have, right? Then he's looking at me like, when have we ever had that conversation? But we're like, oh, I gotta have that. They probably like work really hard for that. They probably never show their weakness. They never ask for help. And they work really hard for like, okay, honey, put everything away, put everything aside. We are working for that trip to Disney. Because those things are expensive. And sometimes that mentality, if we're not careful, can slip into our spiritual walk. If we're not careful, that same mentality can affect our Christian walk. We're like, oh, I'm struggling with this. I can't deal with this sin anymore. It's overwhelming me. But I'm a Christian now, that means that everything's A-okay. Nothing can hurt me, right? So I just gotta push forward. And somebody asks us, oh, how are you doing, brother? How are you doing, sister? Like, no, I'm fine, everything's okay. God's with me, I can do it. Nothing to complain about. Right? If we're not careful, it can even go to, oh, you hear that so-and-so is going through this trouble? They must not be praying enough. They must not be praising enough. Right? I know nobody here does that. Amen? Everyone in. That's good enough. And there's moments when we're overwhelmed, when life is just hitting us over the head with health issues and financial issues and so many things that just seem like it's too much. Like we can't do it. But we say to ourselves, no, I can do this. God doesn't give you more than you can handle, right? I can carry this cross. This is for me. This is my trouble. This is my tribulation. I gotta push through it. As if our actions have gotten us to where we are now. As if what we have done in our lives is by ourselves and by our own will. And we look at a story like Jacob's, like the one we just read, and we think, oh, good for Jacob. He got his blessing. He wrestled with God. He didn't let go. And he got that blessing. Like that's what we have to do now. That's what we gotta do. We just gotta wrestle with God. If that's what I do, I gotta wrestle with God. And I gotta not let go. And then I'll get my blessing. Right? But that's the way I've thought of this story. That's the way I've seen it. That's the way I've heard preachings about it. And it wasn't until recently that I started to reconsider that thinking. So let's put the story in its context. If you don't know too much about Jacob, he's a twin. His older brother was Esau. He was born to Isaac. And when he was born, his twin was born first, Esau, and he held on to his heel. He came out holding on to his heel. His name, Jacob, actually means heel or supplanter, somebody that takes over something or someone. Later on down the story, you read that Jacob actually traded a bowl of lentil soup. How many loves lentil soup? I got one. I know my wife does. 3, 4. All right. He traded lentil soup for his brother's firstborn birthright. How many love lentil soup that much that you would trade your birthright for it? But Esau was dying, so he's like, what good is it? I don't care about my birthright if I'm dead. So yeah, sure. Later on, he tricks his father into giving him the blessing of the firstborn that he was supposed to give Esau. And I don't know if you've ever read this part, but it's one of the most, to me, the most hilarious interactions in the Bible. Because Isaac at this point, bless you, Isaac at this point is like blind pretty much, and Jacob comes in, he puts on some fur from a goat and a meal that his mom made, and he puts on Esau's clothes. And he goes in, and he's like, yeah, Dad, it's me, your son, Esau. And he's like, well, it sounds like Jacob, but touches his hand, like, it feels like Esau. Like, Jacob, you couldn't even, like, hide your voice a little bit? You know what your brother sounds like. And it just goes on. I would suggest read it in that context, and it's pretty funny. But he tricks his father into giving him the blessing. And then he's like, oh man, now Esau wants to kill me for some random reason. Like, so I better book it. So he goes to his uncle's house to find a wife, as one does. So now his uncle Laban ends up tricking him. And this is the part where all the ladies are like, oh, that's the part that I remember. He works 14 years for Rachel. And we're like, you gotta get me a man like that. He works 14 years for me. But if you read the full story, he's not a great guy. He worked 7 years thinking that he's gonna get Rachel, and Laban tricks him. He gives him his older daughter. And then he works another 7 years, and then he gets the daughter that he wanted, his cousin. Anyway. Then he works another 6 years, and that's just like free labor for his sheep and cattle and stuff. And then he's like, I gotta get out of here. So he confronts Laban and says, you know what, I've been working for you for 20 years. Just give me the spotted brown sheep. That's all I want. They're probably fewer than the good ones, the clean white ones. But working for 20 years, you can figure out a trick or two. So he figures out how to breed the sheep in order that the strong offspring end up being spotted and brown and striped. And it leaves Laban all the weak ones that are white and clean. The sons figure that out, and they're like, he pretty much stole all our cattle. Dad! So Jacob books it, just trying to escape. Somehow, by the grace of God, Laban tracks him down, but he doesn't end up hurting Jacob. And then he leaves that confrontation, and he's on his way towards home. But he finds out that Esau is coming to meet him. And we know that last week we left him off, he was trying to kill Jacob. So he's out of the frying pan and into the fire, so to speak. And that's where we find him, where we started to read. He's heading back home, and his brother that he last knew was trying to kill him. And he's trying to appease to him. He sends everything that he's owned, everything that he's amassed by his talents and his tricks, he sends it before him, and he's like, look, brother, like all these sheep, all these cattle, they're yours. You know, kind of like when you go to your mom when you were a kid, and you're like, Mom, have I told you how much I love you? And your mom's just like, what do you want? Like $10, please. Kind of like that, but this time, Jacob's like, brother, here's all the sheep and cattle. Please don't kill me. Right? He's left all alone. And he sends everything. He's just left with his daughters, his family, and servants. At this point, he's gotten away with everything. He can think that he can get away with his brother as well. And finally, he confronts a man that starts wrestling. And the man had no other option but to just bless him and so he can let him go. And this is certainly how I've read it in the past. I've prayed these words, that I won't let you go until you bless me. If I just pray long enough, if I just pray fast long enough, then I can get the blessing. I can't let go of God because I need that blessing. I'm going through something, right? But this kind of mentality totally flips the gospel on its head. It makes everything by our works. What we have done will get us what we want. And even more so, it makes God into a vending machine, where if I pray A3, I'm going to get those hot Cheetos that I've been wanting. You know what I mean? And that's how Jacob saw it as well. This whole time he's been relying on his work, relying on his tricks, and he's been getting away with everything. He's smarter than everyone, he's faster than everyone, so he can do it. And he's done this even with God. If you want to take a look with me at Genesis 28, verse 12. Genesis 28, verse 12. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it, and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. And Jacob is amazed, and he puts an altar, anoints it, as he should. But then jump to verse 20 of chapter 28. Verse 20, then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me of bread to eat, and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. Jacob, true to his name, is replacing himself with one of authority. I will let you be my God if you keep my promise. I will not let you go until you bless me. But if we're looking at the details, if we're reading this wasn't really a wrestling match. This wasn't a sign of God's strength and of God's power. Come on, Jacob, you were just touched on the hip. Some translations say struck, some translations say touched on the hip. And you just dislocated. I don't know if you ever had a dislocated joint, but it hurts. And he's like, I won't let you go. Even in my struggle, I won't let you go. And it seems Jacob can hold his own against God. But if he can just be touched and be dislocated, be touched and be crippled, who holds the power? Who's walking away fully from that interaction? Jacob, you weren't wrestling with God. God was just allowing it. This wasn't more of a wrestling match than if my daughter wanted to wrestle me right now. And I was like, okay, you got me. You're so strong. It's cute. But then we read that God still blesses Jacob. And if you're like me and you've read this far and you're like, but he doesn't deserve it. What kind of person will get a blessing? He's tricked his father, he's lied to his brother, escaped death, lied to his wives and his uncle, father-in-law. What? He doesn't deserve it. And that's the point. That's the point. That this whole time, God's blessings, God's grace is not contingent, it is not dependent on our works, on our character. It is dependent wholly on God's character. And let me tell you that God is merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Everything that we have, everything that we've gotten this far and far into the future is dependent on God's character. And as Christians, we're supposed to take the Bible and look at it through the lens of Jesus. And we see the story and how Jacob didn't deserve the blessing. And then we look at Jesus. And we realize, oh, I didn't deserve it. I didn't deserve God's grace, His mercy, His salvation. It wasn't my wrestling. God just gave His salvation. It wasn't my wrestling. God just loves me. John 15, verse 16, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, He may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another. 1 John 4:10, in this is love, not that we love God, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be propitiation for our sins. And classic John 3:16, for the world loved the world, that He gave His only begotten Son. Right? For God so loved the world, that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. It's sometimes easier to think that we have to wrestle in order to get what we want, because we have this sense of accomplishment. It's sometimes harder to just receive something freely when we know we didn't deserve it. I think back to the time when we were giving out baskets, I think it was for Father's Day, and this family was outside in the lawn, and we're like, we just want to give you something for Father's Day. It's okay. No strings attached. We're like, no. What's going on? What do you want? We're like, no, just trying to share God's love. Here you go. We always think like, no, I have to do something to deserve this. And it's harder to just receive what God wants to give us. And I don't know if I'm speaking to anybody in here, like if this is relating to you right now or in the past. But God taught me this lesson recently. God wants us to rest assured that He is working all things for our good. Rest that He has finished the work on the cross. Rest that there is nothing that we can do to get into God's grace. He is the giver of life, and we just receive. Life may seem overwhelming, but I can tell you that there is no vacation, no weekends, no days off sufficient enough to give you the rest that you need. You will always find rest, though, in Jesus. If I can read to you Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It's important to rest, but it's important to rest in God. Has this ever happened to you when usually I put my music on shuffle, and I'm like, God, you're the DJ, show me something good. And I usually just skip when I hear something that I want. But every once in a while, I'll feel myself just heavy and burdened with life. And I have to search a specific song that needs to speak to me. And usually, like right afterwards, I can feel myself get lighter. I can feel myself just, like I need to hear a preaching because I can't do Netflix again. Like I need to do something, I need to pray, I need to read the Word of God, and then I just feel lighter right afterwards. I love that in Genesis, after every day of creation, God takes a moment after every day and looks back on what he's done. And he just says, it's good. And on the seventh day he rested. I wonder what it would look like how it would change our lives if we took that as a model. If after every day we looked back on that day and just looked at what God's done for us in that day. And just say, God is good. And at some point, rest. That's what the Sabbath is for. That's why God put that model there. But I wonder how it would change our lives if we actually followed that. I don't know if you ever had like a really good night's sleep. If you haven't, I know everybody's had not a good night's sleep, right? And the next day you wake up and you're like, everybody can notice it. Like, somebody didn't get a good night's sleep. And all you care about is your headache or getting coffee. Don't talk to me. I just want to get through this day. Right? It's all about you in those moments. But what happens when you have a good night's sleep? Like a really good night's sleep. Not one of those days where you close your eyes and you just wake up and you're like, wait, did I sleep? I must have been in a deep sleep. No, like those ones where you feel yourself resting. What happens the next day? You're usually happier, with a smile on your face, and everybody can notice as well. And you start noticing all the people that didn't get a good night's sleep. Right? That's what happens when we rest in God. Before that, it's like, I gotta get through this. I gotta push through. But when you rest in God, you start noticing those people that need rest. You start noticing those people that need a word from God. And you're the one that can help them. The reason this message has been in my heart for a few weeks now is this past year, and especially these past few months, have been difficult, to say the least, to our family. Most of you, if not all of you, know the situation with my eyes, that I can possibly go blind. And I say that cavalier now because I put that in God's hands. And most of you also know the struggles that we had when my wife was giving birth, and the week that we spent in the hospital. But more recently, there's been things that have been going on in my wife's family and in my family, and even in our home that we bought, there was things that were going on, and if I'm being honest, it was overwhelming. It was a lot. But thinking of this story, I was like, nope, I just gotta push through. I gotta wrestle. I gotta carry this cross alone. I can't bother anybody with this, they got their own problems. And I remember one time, after service, moving the things from the old place to our house, because we're gonna move into this place, Juan and I had a talk. And I was able to unload some of these things. I was able to tell him everything that's going on. And I remember him telling me, if it's okay, you'll let me afterwards. But he's like, don't ever do that. Don't ever not tell me what's going on in your life. Let me in. We can help each other. And then like a week or so went by. We had another conversation, but this time in his car. And I remember I was still overwhelmed. Like, I let him know what was going on, but I hadn't let go of those things. And I remember him telling me, just rest in God. He said other things after that, but honestly, I don't remember. I'm sorry. Because once he said that, I had no idea how much I needed to hear those words. Just rest in God. And I broke down crying, and he was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have been. But I broke down crying, and in that moment, I honestly felt rested. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. And this is why this story came to mind. Because it is important to rest in God. And that interaction that I had with Juan brings me to my next point, and I'll end with this. That God does two things for Jacob after that interaction. One, he changes his name. He goes from Jacob, the supplanter, to Israel, which means one that strives with God, or just God strives. And I feel like this is indicative of what God does to us. When we come with a true interaction with Jesus, he changes our identity. And he's like, you're not the one that's going to be going off of your own works. You're not the one that's going to go off of your own tricks and your own strength. That's not how this works. You're going to be a child of God, one that just receives, one that just accepts that I have given you love, that I have given you salvation. That's what your new identity is. But the other thing that he does is that he gives him a limp after that interaction. Jacob ends up leaving with a limp. Something visible that people afterwards are going to be like, yo bro, you left fine and now you're walking with a limp, like what happened? And he's going to be able to say like, oh, I wrestled with God. I got injured, but I still got the blessing. It's not because I was able to. It's because God is just that good. And I pray that this church and God's whole body would take note of that and start interacting with each other and not hiding our limps. That we'd be like, hey brother, hey sister, I see that you're struggling with that limp. You know how I know? Because I got the same one. That we would be freely and openly discussing the struggles that we have. Because if we're called to be like Jesus, then we can find rest in each other just as much as we can find it with God. Paul asked God to take an illness away from him. And God simply replies, no. My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. But we got to acknowledge that weakness. We got to acknowledge that it's not our works. It's not our strength. We are not sufficient in and of itself. And then we can work with other people to look towards God, to look towards Jesus. So musicians would come. And I'll end with this. But if you're that same person and you feel, I can't do it, as much as I work, as much as I try, things just keep piling on me. And you need rest. You need rest. But it can only be found in Jesus Christ, because in Him, everything is finished. He said on the cross, it is finished. And we as Christians have to believe that. We as Christians have to acknowledge that and not work for those blessings, not work for that victory that He's already given us.